Hello, I'm Jude Reid, and this is chapter 2 of the Nightkeeper's Apprentice. Eilidh counted the steps as she went up them, 10, 20, 50, 100, and wondered if the evening sky would be pitch black by the time they got to the top. Magnus didn't seem to mind the climb at all, slinging one of the heavy Hessian sacks from the boat over his shoulder and heading up as nimbly as the dog at his feet, while Aunt Rhona only seemed to be taking them slow to let Eilidh keep pace. "Watch your step here," she said, pointing to where the steps were narrow and sloping, worn thin by feet and time. "These get slippery when it's wet." Eilidh risked a glance over her shoulder and instantly regretted it. The stairs behind her dropped away like the steps of a ladder, leaving nothing but empty air. She'd never been this high in her life. She put a hand out to the wet rock beside her and fixed her eyes firmly on her shoelaces. Going up was fine. Going down, though, one missed step or stumble would send her falling hundreds of feet onto the rocks below. "Not far to the top now, my lass. There's the gate." The last of the steps, 127, 128, flattened off into a narrow cliff-top path, running alongside a shoulder-high wall of rough, whitewashed stones that almost seemed to glow in the gathering dark. Aunt Rhona strode ahead, opened the iron gate set into it, and waited, just inside. "And here we are, Merkskerry, our home. Yours too, while you're here." It couldn't have looked less like home. Eilidh wasn't sure what she'd been expecting, but this was nothing like anything she had imagined. Her experience of islands, which was admittedly limited to Great Cumbria and the one time they'd taken the ferry to Rothsay, had taught her that they rose shallowly out of the water around them, rocky beaches at the edges and hills in the middle. But Merkskerry was different. It was as though a half-mile-high column of land had been cut out of a mountain and dropped into the ocean, the top thick with green plants and dotted with flowers, and the edges nothing but jagged, bare rock. Here on top, the wall formed a courtyard a few hundred yards across, holding in the tower she'd seen from the sea below, a few outbuildings and a low cottage painted the same white as the walls. Outside the wall, the rolling grass gave way to heathery moorland scattered with rocks, miniature lochs, and the ruins of older buildings. The wind was every bit as loud as it had been out in the water, but here it whistled as well as roared as it blew between the buildings, the air full of salt spray and the rank smell of rotting fish. "Come in and get dry." The door to the cottage wasn't locked. Aunt Rhona guided her inside, where she hung up her oilskin on a peg, then through a door to the left into a room that smelled of wood smoke and damp. Heavy homespun curtains blocked the light from two narrow windows, but even in the gloom, Eilidh could see matching blankets thrown over a pair of high-backed wicker chairs set either side of a fireplace, where the dog had already settled himself. Another curtain hung over a doorway that led into a kitchen just big enough for an iron range and a white ceramic sink. "Now, you warm yourself by the fire. I'll get you a bite to eat." Aunt Rhona took Eilidh's coat, then stopped, staring into Eilidh's face like she was looking for something there. "You're very like Eric, my lass," she said, and all of a sudden swept Eilidh into a huge bear hug that smelled of wet sheep and musty oilcloth. Eilidh froze, startled, but the arms around her were so warm that she could almost imagine it was Dad scooping her in close. After a moment, Aunt Rhona pulled away, holding Eilidh's shoulders at arm's length again. "We were worried for you when we heard about the bombs. I've said to your mother from the start of this that we would be glad to have you here." She paused. "I'm happy," she agreed at last. That was news to Eilidh. Mum had never mentioned Aunt Rhona, much less any offer to stay in Merkskerry. Not that Eilidh would have wanted to go, of course, but still. The dog by the fire yawned, stretched, and turned its head to Eilidh, its tail wagging against the bare floorboards. She crouched down and offered her hand for it to smell, and it turned its head to one side, looking curiously at her with mismatched eyes. Gently, so as not to startle it, she scratched behind its soft ears, and the wide mouth opened in an extremely human-looking grin. "That's Odin," Aunt Rhona said. "Looks like he's taken a shine to you already. He's all bark, no bite, that dog." Same's true for Magnus. "He'll maybe be off with you at first, but this place is your home, every bit as much as it's his." She tapped her hand on the back of the wicker chair. "You settle yourself. I'll make you something to eat. How do some eggs sound?" Eilidh's mouth watered. It had been months, years maybe, since she'd had a fresh egg. "You've got hens here." 3 of them, and a goat. We'll get you to work milking once you've settled in. And there's a vegetable patch out the back. We'll make a crofter of you yet. Aunt Rhona put a gleaming copper kettle on one side of the range and a cast iron frying pan on the other, adding a generous pat of yellow butter that melted and sizzled as soon as it touched the hot metal. 3 eggs followed a moment later, and the room filled with a bright, rich smell. There you are. Aunt Rhona put a tin plate with 2 fried eggs, a slice of crumbling brown bread, and an empty mug on the table in front of her. You make a start, and if you're still hungry after, then there's more. Eilidh stared at the plate. It stared back at her, the eyes like 2 eggs, and she wondered for a moment if she was too tired to eat. Then her stomach gave a growl of hunger, and she decided to let it win. She broke off a piece of bread, dipped it in runny orange yolk, and shoved it into her mouth. The taste was incredible. Better than any egg she'd ever tasted, 1,000 times better than the weird lemon yellow powder they'd been making do with for years. Good? Eilidh nodded. Really good. Aunt Rhona slithered a 3rd egg onto Eilidh's plate, then filled her mug with tea, leaving space at the top for a splash of thick, creamy goat's milk from the jug. Eilidh took a gulp from it, then ate her eggs one after the other, mopping smears of yolk from her plate with the last of the bread. Thanks. More? Eilidh considered. The dog yawned again, and Eilidh found herself answering with a yawn of her own. No thanks. Maybe later then. Oh, you'll be tired, I expect. Aunt Rhona poured herself some tea, sat at the head of the table and wrapped her hands around her mug thoughtfully. Do you want to take a nap? Now she had started yawning, it was hard to stop. It couldn't be much after dinner time, but Eilidh was ready for her bed already. She pulled Dad's old watch out of her pocket and opened it. How can it only be 6:10? And was about to snap it shut when she noticed Aunt Rhona had fallen silent, her eyes suddenly wide. Is that Eric's watch? The eggs seemed to jump in Eilidh's stomach. Something in the way Aunt Rhona was looking at the watch made Eilidh close her hand round it. He gave it to me before he went away with the ship. Would you let me take a look at it? Aunt Rhona held out her big weathered hand, her brow furrowed in an expression that seemed half worry, half sadness. Please? Eilidh cautiously placed the heavy silver watch in Aunt Rhona's palm, careful to keep the silver chain twisted around her own fingers. She didn't think her aunt would steal it. She was family after all, but the thought of letting go of the last thing Dad had given her set her guts tangling like fishing nets. Aunt Rhona took it, leaning forward so that the chain between them hung slack, and turned the watch back and forward so it sparkled in the firelight. She traced her fingers along Dad's monogram on the back, EMF, opened it and watched the second hand sweep round, then held it up so the sea glass bead gleamed like an uncut diamond. I always wondered about this, she said, in a very quiet voice. Eilidh waited. Can I have it back? She said at last. Aunt Rhona looked up and blinked like she might have forgotten that Eilidh was there. Of course, I'm sorry. She placed it carefully into Eilidh's hand. It's a precious thing, that watch. Eilidh frowned. I know it is. It needs to be kept safe. Aunt Rhona's eyes flicked to the mantelpiece above the fire, where a ship and a bottle sat between a box that looked like it might have been carved out of driftwood and a green glass buoy the size of her fist. Maybe you'd like to put it on the mantelpiece for safekeeping. I'd hate for you to lose it after all this time. I haven't lost it so far, Eilidh wanted to say, but she bit the words back. What if she did lose it, though, like the bracelet Dad had given her for her birthday, or the steady stream of pencils and jotters that passed through her hands at school and vanished into thin air? How would she explain that to Mum? Or to Dad when he came back? It'll still be mine, though, won't it? Aunt Rhona's face softened. Of course, my lass, that's not going to change. Only, if it went in the sea, a troubled frown crossed her face. You'd have no chance of finding it. The watch sat in Eilidh's palm, smooth and round as an egg. All right, for safekeeping. Good lass. Aunt Rhona took the little box from the mantelpiece, opened it, and waited until Eilidh placed the watch inside. It fit as though the box had been made for it, the round body of the watch nestling in the bottom, and the chain curling around it like the tail of a sleeping cat. For a moment she wanted to snatch it back, but instead she ran her finger over its surface one last time, like she was saying goodbye to it in her head. It's here whenever you want it. Aunt Rhona closed the box with a hollow clunk and replaced it on the mantelpiece. Your Dad made that ship in a bottle too, you know. He was good at those. She flashed Eilidh a quick, warm smile. There's a few other things I need to let you know about island life in general and, well, the Skerry in particular. It's not always safe until you know its ways, and I don't want you coming to harm. I don't want to have to tell your mother you've fallen down the steps and broken your leg when I was supposed to be keeping an eye on you. Does that happen a lot? Aunt Rona laughed. Well, no, but mostly because we don't have many visitors, and it's fine if you're careful. But until you're used to the place, best you stay up on the Skerry unless you're with Magnus and me. If you have to get into the shore for whatever reason, it's by those steps and those steps only, and that applies to all of us. The cliffs are steep and they're dangerous. If you break your leg, there's a hospital in Kirkwall. That's the biggest town on the islands, but it's a long boat trip from here. Eilidh wanted to roll her eyes and tell Aunt Rona she wasn't a baby, but she bit her tongue. Her aunt was just trying to look out for her, and besides, Eilidh was more afraid of heights than she liked to let on. There was no way she was playing on the cliff edge under any circumstances. The steps were bad enough. Second thing, you might see strange objects washed up on the shore here. Some of them from wrecks, some of them from other places. Aunt Rona was frowning, the words coming out of her mouth slowly and carefully. If you find anything unusual, best you bring it to me. Better yet, leave it untouched. Mark the place and come and find me. What sort of thing? Anything strange. Bones, wreckage, sea glass. Do you know what that is? Like on Dad's watch chain. Right, it's pretty, but leave it be. Aunt Rona smiled, but there was something in her expression that warned Eilidh not to ask too many more questions. There are different rules here. I don't want you getting into trouble, that's all. Can you heed that for me? All right. Good girl. And the last rule. Aunt Rona pointed through the window to the lighthouse. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, you never, ever set foot in the tower.